Oh, hello. Welcome to the 2013 Hundie Challenge. Today we're going to be discussing Shaka Zulu by Max Power. Dee-doo-dee-doo-doo, dee-doo-dee-doo-dee-doo-dee-doo-doo, dee-doo-dee-doo-doo, dee-doo-dee-doo-dee-doo-doo-doo. Well, this was without a doubt one of the strangest books I've ever read. I hesitate to say it was the strangest, because I've read things like Sophie's World and The Master and Margarita and Finnegan's Wake, but it was still extremely peculiar. Not at all what I was expecting. I had gotten into a sort of, I think I've discussed this before, sort of a rut or an understanding of what these kind of Victorian, Edwardian British novels were like. And Zuleika Dobson just kind of blew the whole thing out of the water. This book it didn't make any sense in the narrative, and it didn't make any sense in the structure of the book either. It was very peculiar. The narrative was basically about this duke, who's kind of like a Renaissance man at Oxford. You know, he's got money, he's got power, he's really good at all his classes, and blah, 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 blah. And then there's this woman, Zuleika Dobson, who is kind of useless. She's kind of a dumbass, but she's beautiful, and everyone's always enamored of her. And the reason is kind of unclear. She's never described as like a striking beauty or like Cleopatra. I think she compares herself to Cleopatra. But she's just kind of a dodo head. And but she wanders around Europe and kind of slumming it, but she always has these really wealthy guys that become obsessed with her. And that was kind of a funny scene in the book when he starts like dropping these really weird names. He's like Count Salamander Salamandrovich of Russia, and like all the names are really ridiculous, and you're like, well, this isn't a serious book at all. Because usually you pick up these books from this era and it's like exceedingly serious, and maybe there's a little bit of droll wit in it. But he was just like really early on like making it crazy. So she becomes a magician, and she's described as like a 10th-rate magician. Like all she does is like pull a nickel out of your ear and like dumb tricks like that. But because of her weird animal magnetism, she's like on the biggest and brightest stages of Europe, and she's kind of like on the Broadway, and she's like kind of really famous. And it's one of the earliest books that I've read that talks about kind of celebrity. So she's kind of like a vapid celebrity, like one of our today's, like, Kim Kardashians or Paris Hiltons, where we say, like, well, what's her she doesn't really have any talent. It's odd that she's pursued by the press so much. And it even says some of the stuff that we think of as being, like, really modern, like the press will follow her and take pictures of her with her dog and all this kind of stuff. And she's happy to see herself in all the newspapers. So anyway, she goes to Oxford to see her grandfather, who's a dean or something at Oxford. And this duke falls for her, as everyone does. And the duke he doesn't act like a normal human being. Like, there's nothing that makes sense about his behavior. First he's in love with her, then he hates her. Then he's like, I'm going to kill myself for you. And then she's like, well, I don't love you. And he's like, well, I already said I'm going to kill myself, so I guess I got to follow through on that. And then he convinces everybody else in Oxford to kill themselves for the love of this woman that doesn't care about them. And they all agree to it. And they're all just like, yeah, fuck it, whatever, I'll kill myself. Just to like prove something. And it seems like weirdly medieval, but there's no explanation for it. She never does anything that would make any of them fall in love with her. And then in the end of the book, spoiler alert, whatever. I don't really worry about spoiler alerts on this challenge, in case you can't tell. Everybody in Oxford kills themselves for her. It's like weirdly comic. Like weirdly, it's like absurdist almost. So that's the narrative that doesn't make sense. And then the way that he writes the book is also really strange, because he only follows the narrative about 50% of the time. And then the other 50% of the time, he's talking about, like, ghosts that, like, are watching the action. And he'll be like, and the ghost of Chopin was watching the Duke at his piano recital and, like, nodding along. And they'd be like, the ghost of this founder of Oxford's Judas College or whatever was watching and was, like, stabbing him with a sword, but it was a ghost sword, so it didn't do anything. And you're like, what the fuck is going on with these ghosts? And then he starts talking about himself, Max Beerbohm, and how the gods of Olympus gave him all these powers to see what was going on. And then for a couple of chapters, he's talking about himself, like, with his intimate knowledge of Zeus and the Muses, and how they let it so that he could be invisible and watch all this stuff happening. And it was just really, like, really peculiar. And I almost feel like it was almost like laugh out loud funny. Like, you kind of would snort with laughter at some things, but because it's so kind of old-fashioned, I got the impression that if you had read it back in the day, you would have been, like, falling over yourself with laughter. Definitely mind-blowing, not at all what I expected book. I would actually recommend it. Oh, and it's a fast read, which is always, good by me. Because when you have to slog through these sorts of books, it's just like, is it worth the effort you're putting into it? But for something this absurd, it was well and truly fast-paced and easy to get through. So thanks for tuning in. Next time we'll be talking about To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf.